Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cast. Guys, I'm sorry it's been a little bit since I've done a cast. I'm doing my best. I'm trying to do a cast every day. Sometimes I'm able to, sometimes not. But I am planning to do more casts more frequently. I'm finally starting to feel a little better. It's not happening the fastest, but hopefully I can bring more content to you guys. I know you guys really do miss my videos when I'm not making them for a long period of time. So hopefully this will hold you off of my doorstep with your knives and pitchforks. But actually, we have a 1v1 today on a map called Winter Showdown. And I've never actually played or cast this map before. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting. It's a really strange map for a 1v1 because both players will start on the land mass in the south, which is green, and then they will be able to, if they choose, take these northern islands and the island in the middle. Of course, there's also naval options, so this map could definitely produce a lot of different gameplay styles, which makes it really interesting. Hovercraft would be a decent option, I think, but naval could also be really good here as well. So tons of opportunity to do anything and everything a player could possibly want to do. Even air would be a good option, just to be able to take these islands. As even if you were to use hovercraft, they wouldn't be able to get up here. There's no ramp up to these plateaus. But guys, if you love my videos and if you want to play, please join my Discord. We are playing all the time. We would love to have you as part of our community. And I'll put the link in the description below. We accept people of all players. And speaking of all players, I need to introduce the players this game. We have Aussie Boy in red, Arm going K-Bot first. And in blue, we have LaFarin, with Core also going K-Bot first. So those are your two contenders, Touch Gloves. Guys, these are two players, I think, that joined, that started playing because they joined my Discord. They found my channel. And I realized that in 2024, there are still people playing this amazing game all the way from back in 1997. So I started playing this when I was 10 years old. That tells you how old I am. So this game's been out for 25 years. I started playing when I was 10. Or it's been out 26 years, I guess, now. So there you go, guys. I've been playing this for a long time and casting it. I still think it is the best RTS of all time. It may not be the most popular, but popular does not mean best. If that was the case, then McDonald's would be the best restaurant. So the best RTS requires a refined taste, a sort of gentlemanly, cultured, distinguished attitude towards the best RTS ever made. I really do think this is the best one. And it's awesome that we're still working on it here in 2024. But again, guys, these are two players that found my channel, joined my Discord, became part of my community. It could be you. You could be in my next cast. Would love to have you. But having said that, these two are not. This will not be like the highest skill game I've ever casted. It won't probably be like some of the games between Race and EXE or Herald and Rock and Lemminkainen and all those top tier players. But guys, I do actually enjoy casting these games as well. There are some valuable reasons to cast games of players that are not the top tier god members of the community. And I will go into that here in a second. But as you can see, Aussie Boy with an assembly line of Pee-wees that just moving across the map towards Blue's base. And now they will reach Blue's production here, causing a little bit of trouble for this construction K-Bot that should definitely die. And yeah, Blue really not reacting that well Might need to use his commander. He has a couple pulverizers here, but that's not going to be enough to stop Pee-wees. Guys, remember in Escalation, missile towers have been nerfed. So Aussie Boy, he's getting a lot of damage done here in the first minute or two of his engagement. We are at the 6-minute mark of the replay. The Aussie Boy definitely in a better position, just sending, like I said, an assembly line of Pee-wees across the map. But guys, I was saying it is sometimes beneficial for me as a caster to cast games with players that may not be as skilled, and the reason why is because when you are casting games with highest tier players, for one thing, the games usually have kind of a predictable style, you know, like the players are always going to be doing the meta thing. Now, one thing I love about Escalation is that there is still, like, in the meta, a huge amount of variability in strategies. And then players like EXE who just kind of poop all over the meta whenever they can and do things that make no sense at all. And then they still sometimes work. But our blue players saying this feels so different than version 3.1. So our blue player, Lofren, may not have even played Escalation at all because he probably is used to where the missile turrets are still kind of overpowered in OTA. This was the best defense in the game. It's cheap, spammable, it can hit ground and air, and it's tracking, so it almost never misses its target, and it does a lot of damage. But these have been heavily nerfed in Escalation because they were deemed too strong. They're supposed to be anti-air. They can still shoot at ground at 1/3 the damage, but that's really not their main purpose. They're primarily anti-air unit. They can be used to kill scouts. Yeah, that's one big difference from Escalation than OTA and even Pro-TA, the other big mod for this game, is that missile towers are still good, but they're primarily designed for anti-air, and laser towers are much better against ground-based threats. So, guys, the benefit of casting games with lower skilled players is that I can explain some of the fundamentals in ways that I wouldn't be able to if I was casting games of the high skill players. At the high skill level, there's plenty to talk about, and there's plenty that the players do that's worthy of discussing, but it's usually all so high level that a new player or someone who doesn't know anything about TA will probably watch my cast and be very confused. A game like this, great for explaining purposes. This is a great opportunity. Aussie Boy just sending his Pee-wees into lines of light laser towers. That's really not optimal here. The Pee-wee is the equivalent of the core AK, but these are like the, let's see what they're technically called. These are called infantry K-bots. So with these infantry K-bots, they do have a lot of uses. Like they're good in combat with other units. They're pretty fast. They do a decent amount of damage at close range, and they're cheap. But they have a short range. And what happens is if you try to just send these into light laser towers, they're just going to die very quickly. Like this unit is not really made to take on fortified positions. They are meant to go around fortified positions. So if Aussie went around here, he could get some damage down. Of course, there is a couple light laser towers in the back as well. But the best thing that Aussie could actually do in this situation is just stop building Pee-wees and go into like Rocco. That's what he's building right now. The Rocket K-bot. These will outrange the light laser towers, and which allows them to kill them without even being hit. Of course, you have to be able to see them, or see them on radar. You can send your Pee-wees in to do that. Or you can also build the hammer, which is an artillery K-bot. So now the question is, when would you build the hammer, and when would you build the Rocco? Rocco is kind of more of an all-purpose rocket. It's more of an all-purpose long-range K-bot, so the core equivalent being the Storm. These are very, very strong on T1. I've called them Kings of T1, the Rocco and the Storm, because they're pretty good in direct combat with other units, but they also are good against defenses as well. So they're decent against everything. The downside is that they're slow, and if they get surrounded, they can die pretty quickly. They really need to be utilized at range. So, but if you're up against just enemy defenses like Blue has here, Blue doesn't even have any units. What you would build in that case, the best thing to build in that situation are just the Thud, the artillery K-bots. Because Thuds are not as useful in skirmishes or combat with other units, but they have an even longer range than the Rocco, and they're great against static defenses, and they can shoot over the Dragon's Teeth. So the Rocco bullets, or the Rocco missiles, or rockets, these will actually impact the Dragon's Teeth, which will stop them from doing any damage until those are killed. But the Thud and Hammer shells arc at an angle, and so they will actually fly over the Dragon's Teeth like this. And this allows for great assaults on defenses. Like, this is a great situation where the Thud really shines, because Blue doesn't have much of an army, but a Thud can still outrange these defenses, and it makes the Dragon's Teeth almost useless, where the Rocco is going to be having a lot of trouble. Even though the Rocco's outrange the light laser towers, it's going to take them forever to kill these Dragon's Teeth. So, yeah, Red is now on air and sending out some scouts. Red wants to see what his opponent's doing. Guys, one thing I will say, this is true of pretty much any RTS, and it's definitely true of TA. Scouting is incredibly important. You don't have to use aircraft to scout. There's plenty of different ways to do it. You could send some peewees in to scout. But it is important to know what your opponent's doing at all times so that you can react properly. Again, this is true in any RTS. It doesn't matter if it's StarCraft, Age of Empires, Company of Heroes, or whatever it is, whatever RTS. Knowing what your opponent's doing is always paramount importance to being able to counter what they're doing and win the game. So Ozzy with some scouts flying overhead, and they should give him plenty of information to make his decision on what he wants to do. Also, another nice thing about the scouts is that he can mark the enemy emplacements with the same marker I'm using, and that allows him to instead of just walking his units into these, he can hit them from a range, which is really important. One nice thing that Lawferin's doing here is he's got a little mobile radar unit. But hold that thought, because the attack is happening here. It looks like Ozzy is finally ready to make his assault on Blue's base. But we'll see if he actually uses the range of his Roccos, or if he just walks them into the LLT range. It looks like, yeah, this is a mistake that new players or newer players sometimes make. Roccos outrange defenses. There's no reason to send them into range of the LLTs. All he needed to do was send some scouts forward, or if he had even sent these peepers in first, this could have been avoided. But he does bring some bombers in. As I mentioned before, there are missile towers on the field. So that attack will not be incredibly successful overall, just because Blue was prepared for it, and these light laser towers could easily take care of his army. if he doesn't micro it correctly. So guys, micromanagement still an extremely important part of the game. TA is definitely not as micromanagement heavy as something like Warcraft 3 or any of the StarCraft games. But micro does play an important role. You definitely want to keep your units at their maximum range if you can, and use their ability to outrange the defenses if possible. One other thing both players could be attempting here is to take these northern islands, and there's also metal under the water that would be a good benefit to their economy. But Aussie definitely has much more of the map. As you can see, blue is just stuck in this tiny little corner, and Aussie has expanded outwards to the south. So nice job by Aussie. Definitely in a better position, even if he still has not broken this defensive line. He does have bombers and more Rockos. Again, though, thuds would be a decent option here, and also Aussie is floating metal, which means Aussie is making more metal than he's using. So you never want to max out in metal in TA. You always want to be using your resources. So Aussie could, at this point, upgrade to T2. A lot of times when you have way more resources than you can use, it's a good time to tech up, because teching up is expensive, and it will give you a way to use your resources and then often give you an advantage over your opponent as well. So another thing you can do is build a metal storage just for temporary metal. So if he builds a metal storage here with his commander, it will at least prevent him from just floating all this metal. We're going to go and speed it up. So blue here is still playing with kind of an OTA mindset, building slashers. This would even work in Pro TA as well to some degree, but this is just an escalation, not really the optimal way to play. The slasher has been mega nerfed from its original kind of value, and now Aussie teching up to T2 finally. I think he's going to bring his commander as well. So guys, with one constructor, it will take like days to actually tech up here. So bringing more units to help speed up this process. I thought Aussie was going to use his commander, but maybe not. But yeah, either way, blue playing the OTA style here, building mass missile trucks, but that just doesn't really work anymore, at least in Escalation. The missile truck is designed mostly for anti-air, though one benefit they do have in Escalation is they have a nice vision range. So as you can see, the Rocco's vision range is going to be significantly shorter than the slasher. So that does mean that having slashers in your army just for the purposes of providing greater line of sight can be useful, in addition to the anti-air capability. And it's not as though they do no damage. You can see they do kind of a sliver of damage with each missile. It's just not enough to really want to mass them for this kind of ground combat, as Rockos will easily take care of them in equal numbers. But yeah, once again, blue in a little bit of trouble, as Aussie has much more of the map and about 3 or 4 times as many resources, now taking up to Moho extractors. His energy, though, you can look at the energy bar, is pretty low. So, guys, when you get to T2 and you start pumping out T2 units and T2 structures, you're going to need a lot more energy than T1. Just as a good rule of thumb, at the early T2 phase, having about 1,000 energy production It's a good start. It should allow you to produce most things, like say Zeus or Fido, while still being able to construct buildings at a decent rate. In other words, if you're making 1,000 energy per second, you're most likely probably not going to stall on energy, at least in the beginning. But of course, 1,000 energy is not enough to last you forever. You will need to keep upgrading your energy as you build more and more things, and more expensive things as well. Like 1,000 energy, I won't really be enough to build Mavericks because they're very energy intensive. But yeah, as you can see, Ozzy only at about 600 energy, so probably about 400 less than what he would want if he's going to be building Mohos and Fidos and everything else. So try to have about 1,000 energy. It's pretty easy to get if there's geos on the map, and of course, this map does have geos scattered about. I think they might be mostly on the. There's one here in the northern, couple here in the northern island. So one geothermal is 300 right there. So that's like you're basically a third of the way there with a geo. If you're just spamming out wind generators on most maps, you can get there really quickly. Titles on this map, 28 energy per title, so you only need about 20-30 titles in addition to whatever other wind generators you have, and that'll get you to 1,000 pretty quickly. So getting to 1,000 energy, it's not that difficult if you've got multiple construction units working on it, and you always should have construction units building energy throughout the game. But finally, Ozzy is ready for his next big attack here. This time with Rockos and a couple Thuds. As I mentioned, Thud's very good against static defenses like this, but Fidos as well mixed in. So once again, these Dragon's Teeth definitely a nice kind of complement to the light laser towers, keeping them alive much longer than they otherwise would have lived. But given that Ozzy Boy now on T2 building Fidos, it's going to be a much harder game. Blue's commander just kind of sitting AFK. Guys, one thing, you always want to be using your commander if you can, either in combat or as a to bolster your army, or to run away if necessary. But you never want to keep your commander unmoving like this, especially in the middle of a battle. So guys, I know that is a little differently paced than the normal games I cast, but it was a great opportunity for some educational commentary. Yeah, the big things there, Blue said at the end, this is not like 3.1 at all. That is definitely the case. Escalation is not like 3.1 at all. It's a very, very different mod than what the original game is. So my takeaways from that are build energy, use your resources, use the range of your units. So if your units can outrange their defenses, then use that. Have good scouting. Use the marker. So remember how I was showing you earlier, mark the defenses so you can outrange them. And build units. Yeah, Blue didn't really build any units. He mostly was just building defenses. All right, guys, thank you for watching that. I'm sure the next cast I do will probably be actually to pro players. I've got something really excited to bring you, so keep an eye out for that, and I will see you in the next cast.